Welcome to the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. I'm Garrett Morrison, and today, with the LIV Team Golf Championship approaching, we're talking about what LIV is doing well and what it could be doing better. But first, we're going to discuss what we're in on and what we're out on this week. Here to do that with me are Andy Johnson and Joseph LaMagna. Let's start with you, Joseph. What are you in on?
Garrett, I am in on playing golf tournaments in the home countries of superstars. And I think this sometimes gets framed as national opens, right? Which we had the Irish Open this past weekend, and it was an unbelievable scene with Rory McIlroy playing to a crowd that was extremely friendly to him. Unbelievable scenes watching him walk down the 72nd fairway. Shane Lowry similarly had a lot of support out there. But I just think in general, it's a great way to engage fans, sell tickets. I think it's something that LIV does effectively, and I know we're going to talk about LIV a little bit later, but having a tournament in Spain when Jon Rahm and Sergio Garcia are two of your biggest stars, I think this is something for the PGA Tour to heavily consider. The Zozo in Japan is not a high-profile event, and that could be really cool if you had more of the top players showing up when Hideki Matsuyama is one of your most marketable global stars, right? The Irish Open could be really cool if more players were there.
I thought that Zozo was becoming a huge event before COVID because you had Tiger go and win it.
Yeah.
And it felt like it had a lot of momentum until the pandemic, you know?
Yeah, and I think another small example would be getting rid of the match play in Austin, where Scottie Scheffler and Jordan Spieth both went to school. There's so much local support for those golfers, some of their biggest stars. I think there should be more of an effort to be a little bit more flexible with venues and get to the places where your best golfers, your most marketable golfers have either grew up or have ties to. So that was a big takeaway for me from watching the Irish.
Norway, here we come.
That'd be sweet.
Is he a star still?
Yeah, that's a good question after this season. Yeah, who knows? Who knows how Victor Hovland is doing? All right, so what I'm in on, first of all, the big thing I'm in on is something I'll touch on quickly and we'll discuss maybe later, is Bubba Watson being relegated in LIV. That's hilarious. I don't know what's going to happen there. I mean, he's like a co-owner of the Range Goats.
From what I've gathered, not a lot of people like playing on Bubba's team. That could be part of why they made the late rule switch, is that Bubba in and of himself is a cancer in his own clubhouse, potentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he isn't playing, then he would be a non-playing GM, presumably. Or maybe he'd just end up playing for another team and retaining equity in the range guy. I don't know. It could get really messy, but I'm pretty in on that. The serious thing I'm in on is during the Solheim Cup, what I saw was really refreshing in terms of the dynamic between the players. I thought there was a great combination of competitive spirit and genuine friendship between the two teams. And it warmed my heart. I couldn't help it. This is a little bit sentimental, but it seems like Nelly Corda and Charlie Hull are really friends, but they went after each other. They had this, it wasn't that great of a match because Charlie Hull absolutely wiped the floor with Nelly, but it was a great matchup, a great combination of two big personalities and great players. And they seem to keep it really friendly, but at the same time, take the competition very seriously and put all of their energy into it. And so that was just a wonderful competition. It just seems like that balance of the friendliness and the classiness and the competitiveness isn't always there in the Ryder Cup. It seems like the men don't quite get that right all the time. But for whatever reason, this past week's Solheim Cup was right on the money with the vibes. The vibes were great. All right, Andy, what are you in on?
I would just add one thing. I thought the personalities were great in the Solheim Cup.
Megan Kang was a big week for Megan Kang.
I just think that in general, the personalities really came out in the group atmosphere. And I think for women's golf, that's a big thing that they could differentiate from men's golf doesn't have a ton of personality. It's kind of like, oh, we like this guy because he hits the ball far, or we like this guy because he's got a good short game, and there's very few players who show personality. And I thought that was a big part of the women's game this week. I guess since you guys haven't said anything, I guess I'm in on golf being held at the greatest golf courses in the world.
Robert Trent Jones Golf Club.
Royal County Down was incredible.
Yeah, of course.
It was awful coverage, horrendous. In terms of it was. I think on the Shotgun Start we talked about how we were excited for a modern broadcast at Royal County Down with bells and whistles. It was like a 2005 broadcast at Royal County Down. It was handheld cameras. They couldn't track the ball. It was just straight world feed. There was no drone. There was nothing out of this world about it. It was horrible, horrendous coverage. That being said, it still was honestly probably the most captivated I have been for a golf tournament non-major division in forever. Outside of the Ryder Cup and majors, that was the most into a golf tournament I've been. And it's because the golf course really forced what you saw was a golf course forcing its will on players. Players had to play certain ways because of the golf design, the elements that were thrust in their way. And, the other thing that worked really well with it was the time that it was on at this time of year. It was wrapped up before the kickoff of football. And the golf has made this they've moved mountains to avoid football. Done everything. But the reality is it doesn't work because the best golf season is September and October, arguably. Late August, September, October. That's when you have every venue in the world is a possible destination for the most part outside of the Southern Hemisphere. And you have these delightful opportunities to have great golf tournaments. And the tour, because of how US centric it is, which Joseph just hit on, because of how US centric it is, it acts like we can't avoid football in any other way. But the opportunity, the way to avoid football was very abundantly clear. And it's also in the part of the world that's got some of the best golf courses that you could play tournament golf on. It just seems like it makes too much sense to have a links season. Everybody talks about links season in July. I think they should have a links season in September and October. And you have these tournaments that end before football, and people wake up. I thought it was great. You wake up, you're having your coffee, you're watching golf, and it rolls right into football, and it solves your big issue with the fall. And then the season makes a lot of sense. It goes from January to October. There's a 2-month off season for everybody, and there you go. It doesn't have to be as congested. It's spaced out. It's the way that the season should go.
They've got to commit to that, though, and train people to watch golf at those times, because the ratings issue is a profound one.
I mean, the ratings issue is an issue with their regular tournaments.
But even more so when you're televising these tournaments in the morning, when you're in that, 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern time zone kind of tournament playing prime time, golf time zone, you're getting the ratings that you are. It's 2 to 3 million on Sundays. But if you're earlier in the morning, I'm agreeing with you. I think it could work, but it's just the ratings for the Open Championship in the US are not very good. And for better or for worse, mostly for worse, probably, US ratings are really meaningful for the PGA Tour and its financial well-being. And so they've just got to train people to get up and watch golf, make coffee golf a thing, really commit to it and actually say, this is a fun thing to do. Let's get up early and let's watch some golf before football.
I just feel like they have a shot in the fall of getting people to watch golf in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And they don't have much of a shot of getting them to watch golf in the afternoon.
Right.
Procore was not a hot ticket.
Did not register on the Doppler this past weekend. Okay, want to get into what we're out on?
Yeah, sure. Joseph?
I'll start.
Garrett's ready to go.
I'm ready and raring. I am out on the LPGA Tours and NBC's seeming lack of readiness to channel the enthusiasm that fans felt for the Solheim Cup this past week. There was real momentum behind the Solheim Cup. People wanted to get on site and watch that tournament. People wanted to watch it on TV. And guess what? They couldn't get to the golf course. There were buses going to the wrong golf course. There were endless lines where people were leaving. Our own Meg Atkins covered this very well, and this was a big subject earlier in the week, so I'm sure that people have already heard about it. But I think the incompetence here on the part of the LPGA Tour, and I'll put this at the doorstep of the commissioner, Molly Marcoux-Samaan, this is their responsibility to make sure that fans who are enthusiastic about the product can actually get on site and have a great experience and be there at the first tee when they're hitting the first tee shots. I mean, it was like, half empty. So just a ridiculous display there. And then the coverage by NBC, predictably at this point, it's been a really bad year for NBC Golf. This has been well covered, but it was strikingly poor. How NBC was covering the Solheim Cup, missing a lot of shots, just not getting a grasp on the narrative of each day, especially on Sunday. They were just lost, and it was really hard to keep track of. They did not find a storyline. They didn't have cameras in the right places. They weren't following the right groups, and they just didn't have an idea of how to lay out the narrative of the day. And those were really, really disappointing things, because to me, it really felt like there was potential for this event to kind of blow up. And in a sense, it sort of did, at least in my little world of the internet and social media. It seemed like people were excited about it, and there was a lot of coverage of it and genuine enthusiasm. But I think that was tempered by the LPGA Tours and NBC's lack of preparedness.
I thought the first tee coverage was outstanding. I mean, it was for like 2 straight hours, and they just neglected all the matches that went out on because the most consequential shot of every match is the first tee shot. I'm being sarcastic here.
You really appreciated the thoroughness of the first tee coverage.
Yeah. I mean, like, you're talking about literally the least consequential shot in a golf match is the first tee shot. And I think like we need to address this with like team competitions. I get there's a lot of fans there. I get that golf doesn't have a stadium feel very often. I understand why it's like this spectacle. It's like this shiny object. But when it comes to showing a golf match, it's literally the least important shot of the day is the first tee shot. And I just can't, it's like now a pet peeve of mine, because like, it's just like running for like the thirsty social impressions. It's like the coverage just being like trying to make golf cool. Like, what's actually way cooler than the first tee is when somebody hits like an unbelievable chip to save par and have a hole and kind of throw the momentum of a match on its head. We missed that because we're showing people walking up to the first tee and a crowd cheering. Like, to me, like, I guess this is what I'm out on. This is what I'm out on. I'm out on golf's constant need to water down the product and like think that we need stuff like a cool first tee atmosphere to appeal to people. Like, show the sport. What's exciting about the sport is when players hit miraculous shots in match play that somehow square matches, or hit unbelievable shots that, flip a hole when it looks like they're going to lose a hole. They hit a great recovery shot and win a hole. Show those shots. That is what's exciting about the sport, especially match play. It gives you this awesome opportunity to show these shots and follow these matches that hinge on like these micro moments. That is what's amazing about the sport. It's not watching somebody walk to the first tee box and people cheer. That's actually extremely dull. And it gets repetitive after, like, show the matches go out, but like we didn't get to see any of the beginning of the Charlie Hull Nelly Corda match. Like, two of the most marketable players, we're not getting to watch the match because we're watching, Lilia Vu walk from the tunnel to the first tee. Like, this is insane. Like, imagine, like, the NFL, the greatest TV sports product. You know what they show about 10 seconds of players walking onto the field. You know what they never miss? A play. They never miss a play because that's what matters. They don't water down the product. It's not like, hey, like maybe they water down the product a little when Taylor Swift's in the stands. Okay, maybe they do that.
It's like 3 seconds after Travis Kelce makes a play. It's
that's like the only time they water the product down. But anyways, my point is, like, show the matches. Lean into the beauty of the sport. To stop pandering. Stop trying to think that golf needs something outside the product. It is an unbelievably captivating, complex sport. And by just showing the action, that's and talking about it in, like, not worrying about trying to make it cool, you're going to make it cool.
Can you imagine if Taylor Swift were dating a PGA Tour golfer, how much of her they would be showing during the telecasts?
I mean, it'd be insane.
It would be remarkable. All right, sorry, you were going to say something, Joseph. Go ahead.
No, I think the first tee build out is important for the on-site experience.
You got to capture it. It's a matter of ratios, though, right?
Right, absolutely. I think the way that they missed the opening shots and you couldn't see a lot of the whole Corda match, like, you've lost the plot at that point, and the same thing happens with the Ryder Cup. It is infuriating as a hardcore golf fan to not see the opening few holes of some of the coolest, most high-profile matches, and you're missing. Oftentimes, the best players are sent off first. Yeah. So the longer they dwell on the first tee build out, you're missing the most high-profile match, like the entire front nine. So I'm with you on that. What I'm out on, I think, is a combination of both things that Garrett and Andy, you've both said. I'm out on a lot of what's happened on the LPGA Tour this year. I think you could make the argument that it was a successful year. Nelly Corda had an unbelievable year, and there's a Solheim Cup that had some enthusiasm for it. But I think the alternate view, and the one I subscribe to a little more, is, yeah, you had Nelly Corda, like a generational, a very marketable young American star, have a good year and a Solheim Cup year. Did you capitalize on it? And it feels to me like they did not capitalize on it in any way. The turning off of a lot of fans with the shuttle bus situation is one incident, but I think it's emblematic of larger leadership issues to an extent. And I think you have to question after this year if it's moving in the right direction. Like, why is 2025 going to be a more successful year for the LPGA Tour than 2024 was? Because at least from my perspective, as somebody who doesn't watch it every week, but does engage with the high profile LPGA Tour events, I certainly was not greeted with a great viewing experience at any point this year. And I think enthusiasm for the LPGA Tour is low. I think it's reasonable to question if this was a successful year, despite some of the windfalls that they could have had.
Yeah, tell me if this is an unfair comparison. It is an unfair comparison, I know that, but look what's going on with the WNBA right now. And obviously, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are rare superstars.
I'm glad that you acknowledge the Chicago Sky superstar.
Oh God. No.
Thank you for acknowledging Skytown. We're very proud of it, us Chicagoans.
Thanks, Andy. This has been your daily word from Chicago man. Clearly those are a rare breed of athlete. But the WNBA has done a really great job of channeling the organic enthusiasm for these players and for the league. And it just seems like the LPGA Tour is not similarly situated to deal with the breakout popularity of any given player, whether that's Nelly Corda or, to an extent, Charlie Hole, right?
Rose a couple years ago was a disaster.
The rollout was not great. And you know what? Like, Rose Zhang has done some remarkable stuff in the past couple of years. Now, I will say that Rose's personality is low key. That's just who she is. She doesn't kind of sparkle in interviews. And so maybe that element isn't there, but she won her first event as an LPGA Tour player. She has kept winning and she hasn't been impressive in majors, but this is still an exciting, developing storyline in women's golf. And clearly what Nelly Corda did this year, especially in the first half of the year, was remarkable. And I think probably could have been capitalized on a lot more effectively by the LPGA Tour. The LPGA Tour, I believe, needs to have the attitude that we're trying to lift up and promote our star players and try to get them to resonate in the culture as much as possible. The strategy is different than the PGA Tour, which can allow things to kind of just unfold. But the LPGA Tour really needs to kind of pounce on these moments. And it just doesn't seem like the current leadership is really into that, right? For a while, when Mike Wan was commissioner, there was a feeling of energy, like we're going to make this happen. But things have calmed down during the reign of the current commissioner, and I think that's a problem.
The difficult part of the comparison is that the WNBA, I think this warrants being said, doesn't go head to head with the NBA, and with the golf men's professional calendar basically spanning year round and it being an outdoor sport, it's a little bit difficult. The Caitlin Clark isn't playing at the same time as LeBron James and Steph Curry. It's really hard for the women's game to earn its spot in the certain television window. But I don't know, maybe there's a streaming option. The WNBA has their own league pass set up, and I don't know if it's the LPGA Tour is going to build out a whole league pass, but I think the availability of watching it on television has been a huge problem for the LPGA Tour this year. It's very difficult to find where it's going to be. So a lot of issues. So I'll cut them some slack on that, but it doesn't feel like they capitalized. Andy, what were you about to say?
I just think in general, it's a tough situation. I think like there are a lot of aspects of the LPGA, and I think this probably can parlay us into LIV a little bit. But I think when you look at the organization, how they view the sport, what they allow to happen on the golf course, how they go about selecting venues, like these are all major issues that hold the LPGA back. I mean, I've been thinking about the idea of how you could get the PGA Tour playing premier venue after premier venue. It's very difficult because like there just aren't a lot of venues that are capable of hosting the modern male professional who hits the ball 350 yards. Like you start to like, it's just like, wow. Like as great as Royal County Down was this week, it was not really a driver test. You know, there was in from that standpoint, like you could like say, hey, is it a complete test if it never really challenges somebody's driving ability? Now, with the women's game, the number of potential great venues that you could go play is got to be close to 500. I mean, it fits in just about anywhere. And of those 500, they might visit 3 per year. I mean, there is a unbelievable opportunity. I think like we saw this week at the Irish Open, and sure, the ratings aren't going to be good, but guess what? You had to go to the NBC Sports app to watch it. Like, yeah, the ratings aren't going to be good. But with the LPGA, you have an opportunity, unlike men's professional golf, to get week in, week out the best players playing some of the best golf courses in the world. And I think that pairing is part of what is going to propel the sport into, like, you need to figure out ways to get more people interested in watching the golf. And by going to local markets, best known golf course, that is a way to get more people interested in the sport. So if you're going to big markets and their best golf course, more people are going to watch the sport because they're going to be like interested golfers that want to just go to the event to see the golf course, to like, it's being held at Medina, I'll go watch that. Oh, it's being held at Blue Mound in Milwaukee. I'll go see Blue Mound. I'll go walk around Blue Mound. Like, this is a way to capture a bigger audience. Also, administering pace of play so that your product is better. It's just a better watching product. I went to a baseball game for the first time since the new rules. Like, in person, it's incredible. The innings just go so fast. And it's like, why isn't golf looking at this stuff? It just like kept my attention so much more, even with a 4-year-old. I felt myself watching more pitches because they were just coming in succession, you know? So anyways, I think just in general, the LPGA like needs to take a good hard look at the mirror and say, like, what are we? How do we differentiate ourselves from other tours? And how do we become the best tour we can be? Because right now it seems like they're just kind of very content being, you know, the second or third biggest golf tour in the world.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. And I have low confidence right now that the leadership of the tour is kind of on top of this, that they've wrapped their arms around this issue and are ready to push the tour forward. And, you know, if I were an LPGA Tour player, I would be beginning to get a little bit frustrated with it.
I mean, there's a real opportunity for them. There's a real opportunity for them to be the most popular version of professional golf.
Men's golf is in chaos right now. Clearly, there's an opportunity, and it doesn't seem like they've really moved on it. But all right,
is it easy to get there? Absolutely not. But in order to get there, there have to be some wholesale changes with the way they do their business, and that to me seems like the thing that it seems like they're almost going the opposite way.
Before getting into LIV stuff, we're going to discuss the state of LIV in a moment here. Let's talk a bit about Good Walk Coffee. So Good Walk Coffee is in my Good Walk mug right now. This is the Fried Egg Golf blend from Good Walk. This is our own blend. It's a bright and vibrant organic coffee roasted to a medium light level. We also have a shotgun start blend that's more of a medium dark thing. So Good Walk is a great company, and we're very proud to be working with them. The founders are golf nuts who also happen to be coffee nuts, and they buy high grade beans from around the world at fair market prices. And importantly, these beans happen to be very, very good. This is delicious coffee. So go to goodwalkcoffee.com/friedegg and use the code FRIEDEGG, all one word, at checkout to save 20% on your entire order. Using the same code to start a coffee subscription will save you 30% on your first order, and you'll then save 10% on all future shipments. You can pause, skip, or cancel your subscription at any time on the website. So again, goodwalkcoffee.com/friedegg. All right, let's get into LIV. And we're going to talk about some ways that LIV could be better, had some fixes for LIV. But there would be those out there who would argue that LIV doesn't need any fixes, that it's doing great, that everything's wonderful, that it's changing golf, and that, you know, in just a couple of years, it's going to be the dominant golf league in the world. You know, this past week, we saw LIV Chicago at Bolingbrook Golf Club, I think.
A major championship level course. As
Bryson DeChambeau said, right? Well, look, I mean, the winning score was, what, -11 or something like that? Clearly it was administering a stern examination of golfing ability. Certainly acquitted itself better than Valhalla. But in any case, I'll start with you, Joseph. I mean, you watched some LIV this past week, I know. Do you think the product needs to be fixed?
Can I just throw something out there?
Okay,
real quick,
go ahead.
To set the table here.
Sure.
We're at this point with the PGA Tour and everybody involved, how the players seem to be just running in opposite directions of each other, and it's become like it's at a point where it seems like nothing can get done. So like if they want to make changes, there's no way both sides of players are going to agree on them. That it just seems like they're at this place where they're at a stalemate where nothing can happen because everybody's at odds with each other. And the setup of the tour is such that you have to get everybody rowing in the same direction, and that seems to be a Herculean task right now. I think the unique thing about LIV is if one person decides that they're going to make massive changes to the tour, they can do it because it's run by one person. It is not run by the players. And
is that one person Greg Norman, or is it Yasser Al-Rumayyan?
I think it's Yasser.
Who's running it?
I think it's Yasser.
Yeah, but where is Yasser these days?
I don't know.
He's not. Andrew Waterman's not quite as visible.
So anyways, I just think when you talk about this, framing this discussion, if one tour has the ability to actually make a wholesale changes and be fixed right now, I think it's actually LIV. I think LIV has a much greater potential of making changes that improve the product. I think the PGA Tour right now is years away from anything changing. So I would say, I want to just preface this conversation with, of all the tours that exist in golf, LIV is the one that has the most opportunity to evolve, to iterate, because of the structure it has. The players are contracted. They don't really have a say. It is run by Yasser and Greg Norman. Maybe not Greg for that much longer, but who knows?
Well, we've been saying that for a couple of years now. Greg Norman, he's hung on. The guy is tenacious.
Him and Jay could have a Survivor contest.
No
we should
kidding.
get them both on Survivor. See who lasts longer.
Cut from the same very tough cloth, clearly. All right. Well, with the table so set, Joseph, I want to get your impressions of LIV Chicago this past week, just to get a sense of where we are right now with the product.
So I think there are actually a lot of things that LIV does well. And straight up, I think the model, if you were going to build a golf tour from scratch or a league from scratch, it would look more similar to LIV than it would look to the PGA Tour, where the members approve of every decision, as Andy's alluding to. I think it has a real problem shaking some of the stink of its foundation and it feeling like a bunch of players who are past their primes took a lot of money, more or less, to exit the competitive environment. It doesn't feel particularly competitive, and maybe we'll get to some of the stuff that some of the honorable mention fixes. Like, I think everything should be geared towards creating as competitive of an environment as possible. One of the things, so my big fix, a lot of contracts are expiring, or apparently at the end of this year. I think it is notable that most of the good golf being played right now in this era of speed, youth, is being played by players who are ages 26 to 33-ish. LIV is significantly older than that. And it's not because they have all these legends like Sergio Garcia who are hanging on, similar to Adam Scott. Like, there are some very talented players who can continue to compete into their early 40s. But the average age on LIV is 36, which is past the window of when you see players playing at their peaks. I just was looking at the Tour Championship. The average age is 31. Right. Of players
and LIV wants to get a young audience too. That's their big thing. They want to skew younger.
What I would do if I were running LIV is I would sign a bunch of these 22 to 24-year-olds who show some upside. They may not be the highest profile names, but they've got power. They have some amateur excellence that they've demonstrated. Give them a couple years to develop. And by the time they're 26 to 27, they're playing in qualifiers to get into majors. You're investing in them, getting them into as competitive a shape as possible and giving them some time to grow. And you need to shed all of these Cameron Tringale type contracts. These 36-year-olds, these 37-year-olds who we know what they are, they provide no value. No one cares about watching Cameron Tringale play. We know what he is. Even Carlos Ortiz, right?
Tringale
He's 33.
is just getting murdered.
He should.
Charles Howell.
Charles Howell's 45, right?
Yeah.
They have so many of these golfers who are past their competitive primes. And again, Carlos Ortiz, I throw, he's 33. He's not going to turn into a world beater next year. If I'm them, I shift the narrative. We keep some of the legends, the Phils, the DJs, obviously Rahm, who's playing at his peak. Keep Patrick
Lee Westwood,
Reed.
you know?
Lee Westwood's 51.
But
there's so much
about Dick Bland.
Talk about somebody who's not.
Dick Bland was one of the best players on the tour this year.
If you want to keep a couple of them.
A banner year for Dick Bland.
How many guys can just go down to the Champions Tour and beat up on everybody and then finish 15th in live events?
You get my point. I think you need to bring in, you can keep some of those legends to mentor this new wave. And then I think you bring in a bunch of 22 to 25-year-olds with a bunch of promise. And one of your benefits is that you lock them up for a few years, give them time to develop, and don't put pressure on them to compete in year one. That is probably the right way to make this whole thing feel a little bit more competitive.
I want to push back a little here.
Right.
Golf is an extremely fickle game, and it's extraordinarily hard to pick what young players are going to pan out. Like, we're reminded this all the time. Norman Zhang. One of their young superstars, big splash signings was Matt Wolff. How's that gone? I think they're young guys that they've signed like promising young players. Turk Pettit, James Pyatt, the NCAA champion, a USAM champion.
Chikara.
They have not worked out. They haven't worked out. So I think the smarter path here is that LIV needs to invest in a robust feeder tour. And I think they've done a little bit with the Asian tour.
Right. Isn't that their idea for the feeder tour? That's what they want it to be.
But if you're LIV, and you could put together the way the Korn Ferry Tour works, it is not a fun place to be if you're on the Korn Ferry Tour, because sure, I have a chance at a PGA Tour card, but I'm not making any money whatsoever. I think the total prize purse for the Korn Ferry Tour is very, very low. I mean, it's effectively $1.2 million per tournament, 25 tournaments. So you're talking about a small investment, a smaller than Lee Westwood investment, and you could have the most lucrative feeder tour in the world. And that's how you build it, because it can't be, we're going to sign 10 young players, because the reality of pro golf is that 80% of them aren't going to be very good. 90% of them won't be a superstar, even if you sign the 10 best players from next year. One of them might turn into a superstar.
That's my point, though, right? You want to hit on one or two of the big ones, and that's way better than taking your chances on Cameron Tringale.
So if LIV wants to have the best tour, they need to also have the best feeder tour, because that's what's going to ensure you long-term sustainable success. It is not giving out these contracts to Carlos Ortiz, overpaying for Graham McDowell. These are not the right answers. The right answers is, how do we build a sustainable future? And that has to be through getting the best players in the world at a young age to play in your system. And I think that, to me, for, with all the, this sounds crazy, for a meager $100 million a year, LIV could have a great feeder tour where you have the most promising players playing, and a real opportunity. You could say to college kids, right now, it's an interesting time with the PGA Tour U, which is promoting staying in school. There are massive benefits to staying in school. But if you could present a opportunity for the best college players to go make a couple $1 million a year playing on your smaller tour, I think that it would give a lot of people a reason to jump over there.
Well, I think there's a bigger question here for LIV than getting the right players and the right talent. And that's whether it's ever going to be on TV in a meaningful way. The CW deal has been kind of a low-key disaster.
I think that deal's up this year.
That deal is up this year. Yes, it is up right now after the team championship. And the team championship week is usually the week when LIV officials convene a few of their favorite media figures, get them in a room and lay out kind of their strategy and their thoughts about where the league is going next. And that would include media rights deals. And so maybe something will come out this week about LIV's plan for getting on TV and getting in front of people. But the CW thing hasn't worked out. It doesn't seem like either side is happy with how it has gone. The ratings, of course, have been legendarily abysmal. They've been abysmal at the PGA Tour level as well. But, like we're talking about 300,000 viewers or something like that for certain days, maybe
That's
less
high.
than that, maybe more, maybe slightly
like
more.
150,000 on a lot of final rounds.
So that's really low. That's really low, even for the CW. So it just doesn't seem like people are following the league to the CW. Now, there are people who would say that we've got a lot of viewers on the LIV Golf Plus app. We don't know who's on the CW app. Look at YouTube. Well, we can look at YouTube. It's, the final rounds generally rack up views in about 100,000 to 150,000 by a few days after the tournament, which is not terribly significant, I would say. And then there's the global scene, but they don't really have huge media rights deals in Australia or other countries. They don't have anything in the UK right now. People in the UK are being asked to watch LIV on YouTube. They have a deal in Spain with Movistar Plus, I believe it's called, which is a streaming service that I think is fairly big in Spain, but it's a streaming service.
Who would have seen caffeine collapsing?
And then, they have the caffeine thing, Caffeine TV, which was short-lived. And then in Australia, they have another streaming deal with a major network, I believe it is in Australia, 7, but it's not on TV. It's not on linear TV in Australia. It's purely streaming. And so the linear TV deal that they struck with the CW, which is not a traditional media rights deal, it was more of a revenue share kind of situation. They didn't initially get paid a rights fee for that, which is kind of remarkable. But that was kind of an accomplishment because now they were on linear TV. They were on a network in the US that could be also viewed in other places in the world through DirecTV or whatever. But it hasn't worked out, and I'm not sure where they're going next. I can't think of the network that they're going to land at. The obvious solution would be kind of a TNT, TBS kind of thing with Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers just lost the NBA and they're desperate for new sports. And so that would seem to be the obvious landing place. But according to Jon Rahm, who I trust on these subjects, formerly of Sports Business Journal, now writing for Puck, he says a deal with Warner Brothers is a big long shot for LIV. I don't know why it's such a long shot, because it would seem to be an obvious partnership. But again, those are cable channels. Those aren't network channels. LIV is not going to land at NBC, obviously. It's not going to land at CBS. Fox does not seem interested in golf right now. And then it's probably not going to land at ESPN or ABC, because ESPN has that relationship with the PGA Tour through ESPN Plus, so that they're kind of blocked out of all of these places where their product could be seen. And I just don't think this is anything until there's a major media rights deal that involves some presence on linear TV. People will say, Phil Mickelson will tell you, oh, we're pursuing the digital strategy. That's going to be the big wave of the future. But we're not there yet. Maybe in 10 years, that would be a great strategy for LIV to focus on digital, focus on YouTube and streaming, and find a deal that would get them out that way. But right now, linear TV is still where the big bucks are. That's why the NBA and the NFL have still been lining up for those deals. And LIV hasn't gotten there, and it doesn't seem like they're going to get there in a meaningful way. Now, again, something may come out this week, But it's a strange situation, and I think that all of this is more or less moot in terms of LIV's popularity until they figure that part of it out.
Yeah, the TV, the visibility of it is a huge problem. And everybody will say, well, you could just go to YouTube or you could do LIV Golf Plus.
So people aren't doing that. It's
not the way. What works is when you turn on, like, I'm going to go modern here. I have YouTube TV. When you turn on YouTube TV and it pops right up here.
That's right.
It suggests it.
Yeah.
And like LIV isn't there. It's not there on my TV. Nope. I watch golf. Like, it knows I like golf. It doesn't pop up. I think it's because like the CW is just, I don't know how the algorithm works, but like it's just not there. And I think like in general, I think it makes it like it's kind of stuck in the middle, I think, in a way too. Like, it is from a product standpoint, it hasn't. They like to say they innovate, but they don't really. You know, they've like done a couple things, but like if you're going to go off the wall and try and like appeal to youth, like really go for it. And I don't think they have, like, I think that's like the tricky thing with it is like they've done a few things that are different, but for the most part, it's the same golf, right? You know, like I think it's an interesting question with LIV is what could you do with the format to improve from that standpoint? Outside of the players, outside of the visibility, what from the format, product, venue selection could you do? I think like one thing that they've done that I'm impressed with, that I respect the shit out of, is they're not afraid to dole out pace of play penalties. Like, I like that.
Slugger's just out there whipping guys.
Well, he's not worried about those guys' kids' college funds like he was on the PGA
That's
Tour.
Right. That's
the guys
not a worry
paid,
anymore.
they're paid
already,
well enough.
They're already taken care of. Yeah, that's right. He's been freed up. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what you could do to improve the product to a degree that it would be more appealing for, say, a network to pick up. Because you've got to have, in order for the product to be appealing, there has to be a large audience that is excited about it. And then people will start to be attracted to that like a moth to a flame, right? And without the visibility, without the, you know, establishment of a large audience in the first place, that momentum just can't get going. And so it just seems like, to me, everything is irrelevant until they figure out the media rights, until they figure out how they're delivering this product to people at home. Because, you know, the live event seems to be going well. I was impressed by the live event that LIV put on in Portland, and that was their second event ever. I'm sure they've improved it, and it seems like people are showing up to these tournaments and having fun. They report attendance numbers occasionally when the attendance numbers are, from their perspective, good. They're not at this point anywhere near a popular PGA Tour event in terms of those numbers, but it seems like people are having a good on-site experience.
I had some friends that went to the Bolingbrook event and said it was genuinely good.
Yeah.
Like on site.
I think that's been the case from the beginning. They've always been pretty impressive with their live product. But again, I don't think that carries this league. I mean, think about it. Think about the salaries that they're paying these guys. You know, Phil Mickelson got a 4-year, $200 million deal. He's getting paid an average of $50 million a year. Who gets paid $50 million a year?
Who's
I'm sure
not good at golf?
Yeah, well, I'm sure PJ could correct me on this, but I think it's like Patrick Mahomes. I think it's like Devin Booker and Steph Curry. That's what they're getting. And so they've laid out this money to these guys, and they're just not on TV. It doesn't work right now. It's so asymmetrical. And obviously we know that the Saudi PIF is floating this, is keeping this going for the time being. That's why it exists. But at some point it just seems like this imbalance has to be rectified in some reasonable way.
I'll throw out one in a little different direction as somebody who watched a decent amount of LIV this past weekend. One thing that has to change, and LIV fans will probably shake their fists at this, but the shotgun start is stupid. And I understand some of the advantages of it and keeping everyone on the course at the same time, tightening that window. At the end of the round is when a lot of the excitement happens on players' final holes, and it's scattered throughout the course. It makes no sense to have those finishing, the climax of a lot of people's rounds all happening simultaneously. It made no sense to me as a viewer watching it. And you have a couple golfers fighting this relegation zone, this open zone, all while Jon Rahm is trying to win. And like they're doing it on holes 2 and 3. Some of them are finishing their rounds there. There's not a big crowd around their 18th green, the second green. I get some of the advantages of it. It is stupid. And I also think you play certain holes for a reason.
What if you went to like a structured like start a little bit on the last day where you had like kind of like a half shotgun, but then the last 4 or 5 groups went off one?
And they currently do that with the last 2 groups.
Yeah.
Sorry if that's wrong, because that's how it was toward the beginning. But yeah, I mean, the shotgun start, wouldn't you say, Joseph, though, that it's sort of integral to the concept that they've proposed so far? Like it's absolutely part of the core structure of what their proposal has been for what golf should look like.
But does it have to be? Like, it doesn't seem like you would actually compromise on much of what they're doing to just change it to where players play the holes in order. Like St. Andrews walking over the bridge on 18, like when that's your final hole, there's something special about playing the holes in the order that they were designed. Like, I know that that's not priority number 1, but it doesn't make sense to me to have players finishing on the 5th and 6th holes and all that action that could be cool. Player going for a course record or something like that happening in all of these disparate locations at the same time. And then having a bunch of sleepy, their holes 13 through 15 are all sleepy at the same time. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. So we've proposed some fixes here. We've got the team championship coming up this week. Overall, I want to put this out there as kind of a final question for this segment. Do you think LIV is in a better place now at the end of this season than it was at the end of the last season? Or do you think it's in a worse position?
I think it's in a better spot. And I would say I think it's in a better spot because of the PGA Tour is in a worse spot. And they also have Jon Rahm, and they didn't have Jon Rahm before. And when you start to look at it, you have Jon Rahm, who's seemingly playing really good golf again. You have Bryson DeChambeau, who won the U.S. Open. And you've got a slew of the biggest names. Like, I think in terms of star power, they have a significant amount of star power. That's important. And I think the general, the PGA Tour doing nothing, every day that the PGA Tour sits in this limbo, LIV gets in a better position. So I think it is in a better position. I do think like the thing to think about is like, if LIV decided to overhaul what it's doing, if they wanted to try something new, maybe it's not even overhaul. If they want to make significant tweaks to what they do, it's actually feasible. The PGA Tour cannot do that. We have seen this, like they're trotting out the same schedule they had last year, this year, despite fans wanting something different. It was reported that it's likely going to be the same next year. And that gives like LIV this weird, like LIV in a way, like they've got like 2 years knowing with what's going on with the PGA Tour to really make a dent. And if you think about it, 2 years is a long time to continue to pick up fan interest. I think there are genuine people that will never go to LIV, and I think like I have a hard time taking it seriously. I just have a hard time. I think like in general, I have a hard time taking it seriously. And they have, the Saudi money thing that is like always going to turn people off. It turns me off.
That has always remained a problem, by the way, with sponsorships and LIV, which is a major thing that really hasn't come through yet at all for the league.
I think it has it's part of its network problem also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without a doubt. Like that's why you don't have blue chip
toxic
networks.
feel about it.
Yeah. You don't have blue chip networks jumping to get behind it because of that.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, if the PGA Tour continues to drag its feet and all of a sudden LIV partners with the European Tour, I think we would probably feel a lot differently about LIV and the future of LIV.
That would be a big one. Now, what you're saying just brought to mind something that would be a really interesting possibility for LIV. What if the league just said the 54 holes, the shotgun start, all of that was LIV 1.0. LIV 2.0 is 72 holes with a qualifying system, not a shotgun start. And we are designed to get OWGR points, to force the OWGR to give us points. What if they did that? And maybe that would take down one of the last barriers that is preventing some major PGA Tour players from coming over. And then there would start to be maybe that critical mass that would lead to a TV deal and the big sponsorships and all of that. They just haven't hit that critical mass point with Rahm and Phil and Dustin Johnson and Cameron Smith. And that maybe has been a bit of a surprise that the clout of those players isn't quite as big as maybe all of us thought it would be in terms of getting the sponsorships and forcing the league's way onto network television and all of that, that it hasn't been enough so far. The star power has not yet overwhelmed the system to gain the league legitimacy. But maybe if it started to get OWGR points, maybe if they changed their format enough so that all of the concerns of the rating system were allayed, then maybe you'd start to see way more players come over, and then it would just be inevitable.
I think like one of the other things is, what if their feeder tour? I think like one of the things that it hasn't done is free agency, trades. Those things have never materialized. Like one of the things that people were excited about with Team Golf was that, like, is there player movement interest? Is there that?
Not according to LIV's in-house journalists. Trade season is full of event and moment for the paid LIV journalists.
Well, I think like here's the thing: is if you had team relegation along with player relegation, and you had a feeder tour that promoted teams and as well as made players an options to sign, if you had a feeder tour with teams in it, it would make it more interesting. It would make the managers more engaged because they wouldn't want to get relegated. Like, relegation is one of the finest forms of getting people to care. And I think like one of the things is like a lot of players there, they sign up and then they just like, well, I got my check, I don't really care. Public embarrassment is a guardrail to players getting fat and happy with their contracts.
I guess one other point on the public embarrassment as a good motivator. Slightly different angle, Andy, but I think one of the biggest reasons to be bullish on LIV is that I think the 2025 PGA Tour season is going to be a disaster. That this year was not exciting, and you had Scotty Scheffler on a once in a 10, 20 year season, winning at a prolific rate, and the ratings were still bad. And I don't know that sponsors are overly thrilled with where they are. And next year, they're running back the exact same stale schedule. I think you could see those same ratings going down, even less enthusiasm for the PGA Tour than there was this year. And that's something to capitalize on if you're a competitor. So that is, for me, like one of the top reasons to be optimistic about LIV if you're a LIV fan, that I think the PGA Tour is set up for massive failure in 2025.
Ironically, I think if you had a couple $1 billion laying around right now, the space that these two organizations have created, it's actually created the perfect opportunity right now to start another competing golf tour.
Wouldn't that be hilarious? Premier Golf League rises from the coffin like in a soap opera.
I think like you've gotten to the point where they've like created this gulf And I don't know if anybody's ever going to be able to get behind LIV. I think that that's a legitimate question. Was the start of it and the kind of is there such a bad taste in golf fans' mouth that it will never be popularly adopted? I think there's a real likely answer is yes to that. The PGA Tour has also gotten to the point where it's so unlikable. I think that right now would be the perfect time to start as crazy as this sounds, third competing tour, thread the needle, and it could be a winner takes all proposition. Now, it would probably take a lot of capital, but I do think right now would be the perfect time for a third tour to launch and potentially win this space.
We've almost run out of people to fund this kind of endeavor because, John Henry and his sort of, Boston area private equity guys have already thrown in their lot with PGA Tour Enterprises. Supposedly, though, there seems to have been scant development of that idea in the past few months.
Sounds like they might be frustrated.
Yeah, I would venture to say that they probably are.
I would just point out that it seems like anybody who has any business acumen that finds themselves in the PGA Tour globe and in the circle, then shortly leaves after extraordinarily frustrated
and confused.
Yes.
What the hell is this?
Yes.
it's often
it is a common,
seemingly the reaction.
It's we've almost reached a stat level, Joseph, you could correct me. We've almost reached a statistical relevance number here where you could say that this is correlated.
This is not just a random occurrence. There must be some cause for these departures.
Well, I think what you guys are forgetting is that on the very beginning of June, Golf Week released a Q&A with Joe Ogilvy that said 4 months from now, it's going to be a completely different story. And that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So that 4-month deadline, apparently the future of golf is going to have been sorted out in that time period. That's what was pledged.
Well, the deal is coming.
Since June, up until maybe last week, if they did the 9/11 meet with the Saudis in New York City, if that happened, that was the first time they'd talked since June.
Yeah. There can't have been much progress given the likely complexity that this deal would have. It would take far more than kind of that one meeting to work everything out. All right. Well, on that note of confusion and despair, let's wrap up our segment on the condition of LIV and the competitive landscape of professional golf. I do like the idea of another league suddenly emerging. That would be an amazing wrinkle in this. But I'd like to wrap up with some recommendations. Let's go to a positive place. And let me go to Joseph first. Joseph, what are you recommending this week? What is something that you like and that fills you with joy?
Easy one for me this week. A Fried Egg listener and friend sent me this. I'll always check out what people send me. There's a YouTube channel called The QB School. And now that it's NFL season, this is a former LSU quarterback, JT O'Sullivan. He goes through quarterback breakdowns in the NFL. Maybe he does it for other levels as well, but it takes you through. They're 25 to hour-long videos taking you through quarterback play. It's really cool. Great example of the use of YouTube and really shows you what's going on schematically, takes you through the reads these quarterbacks are doing. So as we get into NFL season, some content for pretty hardcore fans who want to understand what's happening on a deeper level, kind of within the Fried Egg ethos of understanding golf at a deeper level. I can't recommend it enough. I think I'm going to watch every video he puts out this year.
Nice. QB School. All right. My recommendation is on the musical end of the spectrum. I'm really liking the album Manning Fireworks by MJ Lenderman. This came out within the past few weeks, I believe. A lot of really good indie rock songs on there. If you're approximately my age, if you're, say, 40-ish years old and kind of grew up, came of age in the early 2000s, listening to guitar-driven indie rock, this music, MJ Lenderman stuff will hit you right in the sweet spot. He's a young guy. He's not an old dude like me, and so he seems to be deriving some influences from before his time. But very, very good album, Manning Fireworks. I'm not sure exactly where that name comes from. Maybe it's spelled out in the lyrics of the album, which I haven't really listened to, honestly.
Maybe from watching the UT football game on Saturday.
Yeah, it's very possible that Manning Fireworks happened this past week. We have a running Manning. Amazing.
It can't be a Manning.
Well, apparently his dad, Arch Manning's dad, Cooper, is a little bit more athletic, right?
Yeah, he was a receiver.
When I saw Arch Manning running for that touchdown, just did a double take, and I cracked myself up because I remembered how Peyton Manning used to run, how like sort of vertical and short his steps were, and just imagined how he would negotiate that same play. But in any case, MJ Lenderman, Manning Fireworks may or may not have something to do with the Manning family. Andy, do you have any recommendations for us to close out here?
I traveled a lot of cities, and I'm frequently looking for like restaurants, and I think listen, Google reviews and Yelp are awful. They're terrible. Something that I've found that I really like is this company called Infatuation. Have you guys heard of them?
You've
mentioned them before. Yeah. They have like a good website, right?
Yeah. Well, they do. So they're like legit reviewers. They are employees of a company. And the way that they do food reviews is like, they do not tell the restaurant they're coming. They pay their own bill. Like a lot of reviewers, like they'll let them know, they get comped, like they pay their own bill, and then they write these reviews. They have them for like almost every major city in America. And I just find I like the idea of somebody an individual telling me like about restaurants. What I don't like is like if you go on Google or Yelp, like pretty much everything gets between 4 and 5 stars. Right? Like this website has a really nice curation of restaurants. They have different categories you can click on for like different occasions. You can they have recommendations for like sub $10 meals. They have recommendations for date nights. They have recommendations for big groups. Like it is and then they also cover like new restaurant openings really well. I think this is a great website if you are into food, if you travel and you're going to new areas and you're looking for restaurants. This is they have a map that shows where everything is, so it's like easy to curate. It's way better. It takes a little bit more time than doing like the Google like maps, like restaurants near me. It takes a little more time, but if you want to plan out like a good dinner or get a good meal, like and want a little bit more inside look, like it's funny, like I've used this and like people like that know restaurants and areas are like, how'd you know to go there? And I'm like, well, I use this Infatuation. So this is a great way to avoid kind of tourist traps and find like really good local spots, in my opinion.
All right, Andy and Joseph, thank you for coming on the pod today.
Thanks, Garrett.
This episode of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast was produced by PJ Clark. Thank you, PJ. If you like what we're doing on the Fried Egg Golf Podcast, I think you would really like Club TFE. Go to thefriedegg.com/membership to see everything that we're offering at Club TFE, which includes a lot of exclusive content. One thing that Club TFE members get is access to some great golf courses. Sometimes we just come up with some tee times at certain golf courses, and people get pretty excited about that. And so those offerings come to you if you're a Club TFE member. And I think it's a really great benefit of membership that a lot of people maybe didn't expect when they initially signed up. So Club TFE, we're doing a lot of fun stuff in there that we're very excited about. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back again soon with another episode.